left alone to live their lives according to their own best judgment. And there's always a smaller but more domineering group of people that think they're so good at running their own lives that they're also entitled to run everybody else's. Those are the two parties that exist in human nature. They go by different names at different times and different places, but they're the same two parties. And at this moment in time, those two parties, liberty and authoritarianism, are literally grappling for the future of our country. And like it or not, the Republican Party is in the best position to lead our country back to its founding principles. So don't give up on it. Join it and make it better.
I too am a bit encouraged because I think that any organic movement that has a stimulus for its original creation grows over time if that stimulus is still there. And so let me just give you a vantage point. I remember I came to Caucus with Walter back in 94, 95. And I remember Ron Paul, in very lonely fashion, going down and voting on any number of different issues, single vote. Occasionally Walter would be there with him. There might be 2 or 3 votes. But, I mean, very lonely votes. And then I remember I had a different job for about 8 years in South Carolina. And I remember at one point we tried to turn back some money, some stimulus money. And long story short, there were about 1,000 school teachers out on the steps of the Capitol protesting this. And all of a sudden, organically, on their own, this strange group appears off to the side. And we're like, who are these people? We know who these other teachers are. I mean, they're really hacked off. But who are these other people? And on their own, from different hamlets and corners of South Carolina, people of their own volition, their own will, no central authority, no organizing force, had come together saying, no, we think you're wrong with regard to the stimulus. And I think the stimulus was a real tipping point with regard to the liberty movement and the way that it really took off. And so what I say is, it's interesting to come back after 13 years being gone from Congress and to walk in and see somebody like Justin Amash or Tom Massey go down the list. I had no idea either that there was such a group, and it is, again, a quantum leap relative to where the liberty movement was, I would argue, 20 years ago in the U.S. Congress.
Yeah, just very briefly, we have a lot of reasons to be hopeful. Look at this crowd here, the panel here. This is just a small number of the people who are involved in the House Liberty Caucus. When I arrived to Congress a few years ago, it wasn't a big group. I went to the meetings in Ron Paul's office, and it was still a pretty small group. It was starting to grow. But now we've got really a group of about 36 people. Now, they don't come to every meeting, but we have a group of 36 and growing individuals in the House who believe in the principles of liberty. And we don't agree on every issue. We have sometimes very strong disagreements on issues. But I know that this is a group that you can trust to fight for your rights, to fight for the principles that the founders believed in. And we are a growing group. It's not just members who are coming in and getting elected. Thomas mentioned that there are new members who are going to get elected. That's true. That's going to grow the group. But I'm finding that there are also some veteran members who, when you look at their voting records, they're actually very liberty-minded, but they're not that vocal about it. And so we're finding some of these members and inviting them in. And those members are really adding to the group. There are people like Michael Burgess, has a great, very liberty-minded voting record. Cynthia Lummis, I wouldn't have known about that until I really started to observe her voting record. There are people who don't really get the credit they deserve, who are fighting for the principles we believe in.
Obviously, with a room full of young people, what everybody talks about is having a $17 trillion national debt, and I think most of us know that entitlements are the biggest strain on that. I don't know that any of you out there think you're going to see Social Security, are you? No. So my question is, obviously it has to be safe for the people who paid into it. For these people, for the millennials, for the young people, is there any way we can opt out of Social Security? Is that possible?
Jeff Landry actually had that proposal. If you remember, a few years ago, they cut the payroll tax for a couple of years, which then cut the amount of money that was going into the Social Security Trust Fund, which accelerated its financial debacle. Jeff Landry came up with the idea, well, suppose we gave people the choice to take the tax cut. What would they need to do in order to keep the Social Security Trust Fund whole? And the answer was, getting a full year of the tax cut would simply mean delaying your retirement by 1 month. So he said, why don't we give people the choice? Take the tax cut and retire a month later, or pay the extra tax and retire on schedule. That would have begun the transition toward, I think, a voluntary system where people could start making their own decisions again. The Social Security actuary, by the way, said that that would actually improve the solvency of the fund over time.
Yeah, I would say, I guess it was Ronald Reagan who said the closest thing to eternal life is a government program. And I think that they're really, really hard to stop once entrenched. And so I think it would be up to you all. I think it's a vital idea in terms of your ultimate savings. You know, Jose Piñera used to be the finance minister down in Chile, and they moved to a system of private accounts. And you could look at actually 3 counties down in South Texas, Brazoria, Matagorda, and Galveston counties in South Texas, actually have a system of private accounts. It's an idea that's been tested outside our country and inside our country. It's something that works, but it's very difficult to pull off politically, and it's going to be dependent on, frankly, your degree of involvement and getting other young people involved and making noise. Until then, I think the status quo prevails.
I will say on this that it's a system in my mind that was designed to fail. There is no question. And what was the retirement age in 1935 in the system for Social Security? Anybody know? 65 years old. What's the retirement age today? About 67. What should be the comparable retirement age for folks at your age? What should be your retirement age compared to where it was in 1935 when they started Social Security? 87 years old. Politicians for decades have known this was coming. We don't have enough folks to support a government retirement system. But I'm looking out in the audience, yeah, it looks like a bunch of suckers. You get to pay for generations of folks, so don't worry about that. In 1950, we had 6 workers for every retiree. In 2030, 2 workers for every retiree. It doesn't work. You know, I know my colleague from California, I don't know if there's really a Liberty Party in California. I wonder about that. But I wonder how much of a Liberty Party we have in this country, because both parties have ignored this, have lied for generations, and don't worry, you've got a little trust fund over here with your name on it. There's nothing there. And young folks understand that. We need to provide options for folks to understand that government's not going to take care of it. It's not going to work out that way. You understand that? Everybody in this room, I didn't see a person raise their hand and say, hey, I'm waiting on the government to take care of it. It's not going to happen. And we need to work quickly, because the demographics are devastatingly catching up with us as a nation.
Very quickly, the reason I'm 71 years old, I want to be here tonight with these young guys, with you young people. Because you're the future. If you don't take it now, there will be no future. Let me give you a quick example. In 1997 was the last year I voted for a debt ceiling increase. The debt ceiling in 1997 was $5.7 trillion. As you were seeing just a moment ago, it's well over 17 trillion. In the last 6 weeks, the Republican Party passed 4 tax extension bills on the floor. A cost to the deficit of about $500 billion. Today, I have 60,000 retired military in my district. I voted no on the VA bill that came from the Senate. Why? Because over 10 years, it's already been scored by Congressional Budget Office of cost of another $500 billion. That's $1 trillion in 6 weeks by the Republican Party. You've got to take it back. whether it's within the Republican Party or outside the Republican Party, because you will not have a future. Thank you.
The House Liberty Caucus in particular members have been famous, if you will, for spearheading this, or fighting, if you will, NSA's controversial metadata collection program. I think each of you have been attacked for protecting the Bill of Rights and Fourth Amendment. You know, Congressman Moss, people like Mike Rogers just go after you with no abandon whatsoever. Do you think, I mean, it seems like the American people, when you look at the polling, are against their government spying on them. They are against this. Is the Republican Party just stupid? The establishment that supports this stuff? Or is this disconnect between Washington and the people?
There's a big disconnect, and I would say that most Republicans are with us actually on this issue. Most Republicans want to protect your privacy, but we have people at the very top, and especially people within the intelligence committees in the House and the Senate, who believe that they need to do everything they can to collect everything on everyone, because in their opinion it makes you safer. In my opinion, it makes our country more dangerous. When we destroy our Constitution and undermine liberty, it makes our country more dangerous. That's what happens in third world countries across the globe. Where they don't have freedom, and their lives are destroyed as a result. So we need to preserve that liberty. Most of our colleagues are with us, frankly, but you have people at the very top, from President Obama to Nancy Pelosi to Speaker Boehner, who think that it's okay for the government to continue to do this. And we're standing up to them, and we're making a difference. And Thomas recently offered an amendment on the floor that was successful. And hopefully he'll talk about that.
The reason it was successful, though, is because Justin broke the ice. He started the debate, really, with the metadata issue, and took it to the floor. I mean, it was a classic debate among those who didn't get it and those who did. And it failed by, only 6 votes. But the thing was, if you watch any of the YouTubes of those congressmen that voted against Justin's amendment, of their town halls, the week or two after that, it's like watching NASCAR just to look for the wrecks. There were plenty of wrecks after they voted against that. And so where my amendment was different, it dealt with the prison program, where they're not just collecting your metadata, they're collecting the content of your emails, they're collecting your photographs, recordings of your phone calls. If they think that electronic transmission may have crossed the borders of our country. But the reason people, I think, really voted for my amendment, 293 to 123, which, by the way, is a veto-proof majority. Even if the president doesn't want to do this, we can get this done. But I think the reason they voted for it, a lot of them, they were afraid not to vote for it because the ones who had voted against Justin's got crushed back in their district.
I think your question was whether the Republican establishment is stupid, and the answer is yes. I think you should give yourselves a hand. It's you guys who make the difference, because this would have never happened if we didn't have the town hall meetings where you showed up and you complained and you talked to your congressmen and congresswomen and you told them that you would not accept that vote that they made, and that you would actually make a difference in the next election. And the fact that they knew that you were serious, and they knew that you were actually going to make a difference, and that you were going to organize, and that you're going to do the things that were necessary to unseat that person, that's why we went from losing by 6 votes and winning by a veto-proof majority. And that is a change, it's an extreme change in the Republican Party. You have the majority of a Republican conference that believes that we have to do something about the NSA. And the reason I say that the establishment is stupid, for purely political reasons. So even if you don't agree on the policy, but just for purely political reasons, the Republican Party should be the party of privacy and liberty. So that's what the American people
I remember during a heated debate on this subject, Mike Rogers pointing person who takes up arms for the country takes? Is it to preserve, protect, and defend the United States of America? It's not to preserve, protect, and defend the United States government. It's to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution.
Yeah.
Why is it? That's the only oath you take. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, or support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, by the way, foreign and domestic. Now, why is that? I think it's because the American founders realized that if we ever lose our Constitution, it means we've already lost our country. Look back at the antecedents of this whole debate. They go back to the general warrants issued by the Royal Governor of Massachusetts in the 1760s, which allowed royal officials to go in on whim and go through your personal belongings, your personal records, your personal letters, looking for evidence without accusing you or having any reasonable suspicion that you've committed a crime. That was so offensive to the American colonists. There was a big lawsuit argued by James Otis Jr., one of the American founders, in Boston in 1760. And he called these tools, these general warrants, tools of tyranny. He said they were an affront to the rights of Englishmen. There was a 25-year-old young attorney who was there in the courtroom that day when the case was heard. And years later, he wrote his recollection of that. And he said, "I went away from a crowded courtroom, as did every man, resolved to take up arms against the writs of assistance," the general warrants. He says, "Then and there, the child Independence was born." That attorney was John Adams. In all of his experience in the American Revolution, he believed that was the seminal moment when the revolution began. And yet today, and that's why the Fourth Amendment was placed in the Constitution. And yet today, we're seeing these general warrants being executed on a scale unimaginable in colonial times. And that's the great question that your generation is ultimately going to answer, is whether the Constitution will stand. You look at all of the laws that are passed under the Constitution, there is this massive enforcement bureaucracy. You break any of those laws, somebody's going to end up at your doorstep with a gun. But you break the Constitution, there's no enforcement. Nothing happens. Why is that? It's because the Constitution was written to be self-enforcing. But that only works if the people who are exercising powers under that Constitution are devoted to it. And that only works if the American people insist on it through the votes they cast in each election. That's